The invitation commander, Sarah Chen, stood at the viewport of the transport vessel, watching as the massive orbital station grew larger against the backdrop of countless stars. The structure was beautiful in its symmetry, a perfect geometric design that spoke of careful planning and mathematical precision. 16 separate rings rotated slowly around a central core, each one housing facilities from different member species of the Galactic Coalition. It was called Nexus Prime, and it represented everything the Coalition valued: order, unity, and cooperation. "First time seeing it in person?" asked Lieutenant Marcus Webb, stepping up beside her. His reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a man in his early 30s, his uniform crisp despite the 3-day journey from Earth. "First time being invited," Sarah replied. "The Strategic Command Assessment. Do you know how many species have been asking for this opportunity for decades? And we've only been in the Coalition for 5 years. Marcus grinned. "Well, when you help stop an invasion fleet from wiping out half the Coalition's agricultural worlds, people tend to notice." Sarah shook her head, but she was smiling too. The Battle of Kepler 442 had been humanity's introduction to real interstellar warfare, and somehow, against all probability, they had emerged victorious, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through tactics that had left their allies both grateful and deeply confused. The docking procedure took another 20 minutes. Sarah used the time to review her team one more time. 12 officers, each one selected for their expertise in different aspects of military strategy. They were the best Earth had to offer, and they needed to be. This assessment would determine humanity's standing in Coalition military operations for years to come. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and they were greeted by a delegation that took Sarah's breath away. At the center stood Ambassador Thorian, a Vexillian whose crystalline form refracted the station's lighting into rainbow patterns across the corridor walls. To his right was General Krath, a Drogar whose 4 arms and imposing height made him look like something from ancient Earth mythology. And to the left stood High Coordinator Velnus, a siren whose flowing, almost liquid appearance seemed to defy physics. "Commander Chen?" Thorian's voice resonated through a translation device embedded in his chest. "On behalf of the Galactic Coalition Defense Initiative, we welcome you and your team to Nexus Prime. We are honored to host humanity's first participation in the Strategic Command Assessment." Sarah saluted, a gesture that the Coalition had adopted from various member species. "The honor is ours, Ambassador. My team and I are grateful for this opportunity. Come," General Krath gestured with 2 of his arms. "We will show you to your quarters, and then we must discuss the protocols. There is much you need to understand about the sacred nature of what we do here." That word, sacred, caught Sarah's attention, but she simply nodded and followed. The quarters assigned to the human team were spacious and well-appointed, with accommodations that had been carefully researched to suit their needs. But it was the briefing room that truly impressed Sarah. One entire wall was a display screen showing a real-time tactical map of a simulated star system. The other walls held paintings and sculptures, each one depicting famous battles from Coalition history. High Coordinator Velnus moved to the center of the room, her form shifting colors as she spoke. "Before we begin the assessment tomorrow, you must understand our traditions. The Strategic Command Assessment is not merely a test or an exercise. It is a sacred ritual that has been performed for over 800 standard years." "Sacred?" Marcus asked, earning a sharp glance from Sarah. "Yes," General Krath stepped forward. "In our cultures, warfare is the ultimate test of a species' worth. How we conduct ourselves in battle, even simulated battle, reflects our honor, our discipline, and our respect for those who have fallen in real conflicts. Every decision made in these simulations is treated with the gravity it would receive in actual combat." Velnus continued, her voice taking on a reverent tone. "When you enter the simulation chambers, you will be expected to follow strict protocols. All orders must be given in formal military language. All strategies must be documented and justified. There will be observers from each Coalition species watching and recording every action. This is how we ensure that the art of warfare remains pure and honorable." Sarah felt a knot forming in her stomach. "What happens if someone breaks protocol?" "It has never happened," Thorian said simply. "The shame would be unbearable. A species that cannot respect the traditions of strategic warfare cannot be trusted with real military authority in the Coalition." The briefing continued for another 2 hours. covering everything from the proper way to address simulated enemy forces to the ceremonial phrases that must be spoken before initiating combat maneuvers. By the end, Sarah's team looked as overwhelmed as she felt. That evening, Sarah called a private meeting in her quarters. All 12 of her officers gathered around a small table, their expressions ranging from concerned to outright worried. "Okay," Sarah said quietly. "I want honest opinions. Can we do this their way?" Lieutenant Commander James Park, their tactical specialist, spoke first. "Commander, with respect, their way is going to get people killed if we ever face a real threat together. Those protocols add minutes to every decision. In the Battle of Kepler 442, we won because we could adapt in seconds." "I know," Sarah replied. "But this isn't Kepler 442. This is their test on their station, by their rules. Maybe we should show them there's another way," suggested Captain Rachel Torres, their xenopsychology expert. Not disrespectfully, but just by demonstrating that efficiency and speed don't mean dishonor. Sarah considered this. It was a risk. If the coalition interpreted their methods as disrespectful, humanity could lose its chance at meaningful military integration. But if they simply mimicked the coalition's ponderous protocols, they would be hiding what made them effective in the first place. "All right," she decided. "We'll follow their rules, but we'll do it our way. We'll use their formal language and their procedures, but we won't sacrifice effectiveness. If they want to see what humans can do, we'll show them. Just remember, stay professional, stay respectful, but don't apologize for being good at what we do." The next morning, the human team entered Simulation Chamber 1. The room was enormous, easily 50 meters across with holographic projectors covering every surface. At the center was a raised platform where commanders could stand and observe the tactical display that would surround them in 3 dimensions. Already present were teams from 6 other coalition species, each one standing in rigid formation. The Drogar team looked like statues, not a single movement disturbing their perfect alignment. The Vexillian team seemed to glow with inner light, their crystalline bodies reflecting their concentration. Even the normally fluid sirens had arranged themselves in a precise geometric pattern. The human team walked to their assigned position, and Sarah could feel dozens of eyes watching them. She kept her expression neutral, professional. General Krath's voice boomed through the chamber. "We begin the first scenario. You will be presented with a tactical situation requiring immediate response. The simulation will test your ability to assess threats, allocate resources, and execute strategies under pressure. Remember the protocols. Honor the tradition. Begin." The holographic display flickered to life, and suddenly they were standing in the middle of a star system. 3 planets, 2 asteroid belts, and a sun that pulsed with realistic brilliance. Red markers appeared throughout the system, indicating enemy forces. "Scenario parameters loading," announced an artificial voice. "Hostile fleet detected in Sector 7. Civilian evacuation in progress. Defend the colony on Planet 3 while minimizing casualties." The other coalition teams immediately began their formal procedures. The Drogar commander raised all 4 arms in a ceremonial gesture before speaking in a deep, measured tone. "By the authority granted to me by the traditions of strategic warfare, I hereby assume command. First Tactical Officer, provide analysis using Standard Threat Assessment Protocol Delta 7 Alpha." Sarah glanced at her team. They were waiting for her signal. She took a breath and spoke clearly. "All right, people. We've got civilians to protect and bad guys to stop. Webb, what's our fastest route to intercept?" The silence that followed was deafening. Every coalition officer in the chamber turned to stare at the human team. Sarah could see shock, confusion, and what looked like offense rippling through the observers. But Marcus was already working, his fingers dancing across his tactical pad. "Commander, if we skip the standard formation protocol and split our fleet into 3 groups, we can cover all approach vectors and cut their response time by 40%. "Do it," Sarah ordered. "Torres, what's the evacuation status?" 6,000 civilians still groundside, Rachel reported. "Evacuation ships are slow. They're using the ceremonial departure sequence." Sarah blinked. "They're using ceremonial procedures during an emergency evacuation?" "It's protocol, Commander." For a moment, Sarah considered following the coalition's lead. Then she thought about what those protocols would mean in a real emergency, with real people dying while ships performed ritualistic maneuvers. The chamber erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs. General Krath stepped forward, his massive form radiating disapproval. Commander Chen, you are violating fundamental protocols. This is unacceptable. Sarah turned to face him, keeping her voice respectful but firm. General, with respect, we are following the most fundamental protocol of all, protecting innocent lives. Our methods may be different, but our goal is the same. Your methods show disrespect for the sacred nature of strategic command. Thorian interjected, his crystalline form flickering with agitation. You treat this simulation as if it were a game. No, Ambassador, Sarah replied. We treat it as if it were real. And in real combat, people don't have time for ceremony. They need action. The simulation continued, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The human team worked with rapid efficiency, calling out suggestions and changes without formal procedures, adapting their strategy every few seconds as new information appeared. Within minutes, they had successfully intercepted the enemy fleet, evacuated all civilians, and secured the planet with minimal simulated casualties. The other coalition teams were still completing their initial threat assessments. When the simulation ended, the silence in the chamber was absolute. Sarah stood on the platform surrounded by her team, acutely aware that they had just either proven humanity's worth or destroyed its reputation in the coalition. High Coordinator Velnus spoke first, her voice cold. What we have witnessed today is unprecedented. Never in 800 years has any species shown such blatant disregard for the traditions that bind us together in military cooperation. Sarah felt her heart sink, but she held her ground. Coordinator, we meant no disrespect. We simply applied the methods that have proven effective for humanity. Effective? General Krath's laugh was bitter. You completed the scenario in 7 minutes. The standard time is 45 minutes. You ignored every protocol, every tradition, every sacred aspect of strategic command, and you did it all while treating the situation as if it were a child's game. That's not fair, Marcus protested. But Sarah raised a hand to stop him. General, you're right that we approach this differently, she said carefully. But I have to ask, in a real emergency with real lives at stake, would you prefer a commander who takes 45 minutes to complete protocols, or one who saves everyone in 7? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The coalition officers exchanged glances, their expressions troubled. Finally, Ambassador Thorian spoke. This assessment is concluded for today. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss whether humanity will be permitted to continue. As the human team left the chamber, Sarah could feel the weight of judgment following them. They had shown what humans could do, but at what cost? The revelation? The human quarters were silent that evening. Sarah sat alone in her private room, staring at a message on her datapad. It was from Admiral Zhao back on Earth, brief and to the point. Whatever happens, you represented us well. Stand proud. Easy for him to say from millions of light years away. Sarah set the pad down and rubbed her temples. She had gambled everything on the belief that honesty would matter more than conformity. Now she wasn't so sure. A soft chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Rachel Torres entered, carrying 2 cups of something that smelled like coffee, but probably wasn't. Figured you could use this. It's a siren blend. Velnus had it sent over. Sarah accepted the cup gratefully. That's either a good sign or a very polite way of saying goodbye. The team wants you to know they're behind you whatever happens. Rachel sat down across from her. We all knew what we were doing in that chamber. No regrets. I have enough regrets for all of us, Sarah admitted. Maybe I should have been more diplomatic. Maybe I should have tried harder to blend their way with ours. Or maybe, Rachel said gently, they needed to see exactly what we are, not what we can pretend to be. Before Sarah could respond, her communicator buzzed with an urgent tone. General Krath's voice came through, gruff and commanding. Commander Chen, your presence is required in Council Chamber 1 immediately. Bring your entire team. Sarah and Rachel exchanged glances. On our way, General. 20 minutes later, the human team stood before the full Coalition Strategic Council. The chamber was circular, with representatives from all 16 member species arranged in a semicircle facing the center. The lighting was deliberately dramatic, casting shadows that made the already intimidating aliens seem even more imposing. Ambassador Thorian spoke first. Commander Chen, we have spent the day reviewing your performance in the simulation. We have also been engaged in intensive debate about what your actions mean for the coalition. Sarah kept her voice steady. I understand, Ambassador. Whatever decision you've reached, my team and I accept responsibility for our choices. Your choices, High Coordinator Wellness interjected, her form shifting through shades of deep blue, have created a crisis. There are council members calling for humanity's immediate expulsion from the Strategic Command Assessment. Some suggest your species lacks the cultural maturity for military cooperation. Marcus stiffened beside Sarah, but she touched his arm lightly, keeping him calm. However, General Krath continued, there are others who believe we may have witnessed something important, something we need to understand before making any final judgments. A new voice spoke, one Sarah hadn't heard before. It came from a Quarren, a species known for their analytical minds and mathematical precision. Commander, I am Counselor Thex. I have a question that may seem simple, but I require an honest answer. When you entered that simulation chamber, did you intend to mock our traditions? No, Counselor, Sarah replied immediately. Absolutely not. Then explain to us why you treated a sacred ritual like a recreational activity, why you laughed and spoke casually while other teams maintained proper solemnity, why you acted as if the simulation were a game. Sarah took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would decide everything. Because, Counselor, in training it is a game. And that's exactly why we take it so seriously. Confused murmurs rippled through the council. Thorian raised a crystalline appendage for silence. Explain yourself, Commander. On Earth we have a saying, Sarah began. Train hard, fight easy. But there's another part to it that we believe just as strongly. Train like you play, play like you train. When we practice warfare, we treat it as something to be mastered, analyzed, and yes, even enjoyed. Because if our officers are afraid to experiment, afraid to fail, afraid to try unconventional solutions in a simulation, they'll be paralyzed when real combat arrives. She stepped forward, her voice growing more passionate. You call your simulations sacred, and I respect that. But we call ours laboratories, places where failure is learning, where wild ideas can be tested, where junior officers can question senior ones without fear. We're not being disrespectful. We're being thorough. But the casualness, Wellness protested, the informal speech, the lack of ceremony, how can you claim to take warfare seriously while behaving so lightly? Lieutenant Park spoke up, his voice respectful but firm. Coordinator, if I may, in actual combat during the Battle of Kepler 442, our communication was exactly that casual. When plasma fires ripping through your shields and you have seconds to make a decision, you don't waste time on formal protocols. You trust your training, trust your team, and you act. And we won that battle, Captain Torres added. Not despite our methods, but because of them. Our adaptability, our speed of decision-making, our willingness to try unconventional tactics, those weren't accidents. They were the result of training that emphasized creativity over ritual. General Krath stood, his forearms crossing in a gesture of contemplation. I find myself troubled by something, Commander Chen. Your team completed that simulation in 7 minutes. My own species, the Drogar, pride ourselves on military excellence. Our team took 38 minutes. Are you suggesting that your way is superior to traditions that have served the Coalition for centuries? Sarah chose her words carefully. General, I'm suggesting that different approaches have different strengths. Your protocols ensure consistency, clear chains of command, and documented decision-making. Those are valuable. But they come at the cost of speed and flexibility. In some situations, your way might be better. In others, ours might be. The question isn't which is superior. It's whether the Coalition can benefit from both. Impossible, declared a Vexillian counselor. The sacred and the profane cannot coexist in military strategy. Why not? Marcus challenged. With respect, counselor, you're treating this as a religious issue when it's a practical one. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing. Victory with minimal casualties. If there are multiple paths to that goal, shouldn't we explore them all? The debate continued for another hour, with council members arguing passionately on both sides. Some insisted that humanity's methods were an insult that could not be tolerated. Others admitted reluctantly that the results spoke for themselves. Finally, Counselor Thex raised a hand for silence. I propose a test. A real test, not another simulation. The chamber quieted immediately. Thorian leaned forward. What do you suggest, Counselor? There is a situation developing in the Zeta Meridian sector. Pirates have been raiding supply convoys, and they've grown bold enough to threaten established trade routes. We've been planning a response operation for weeks following all proper protocols. I suggest we allow Commander Chen and her team to participate, working alongside our forces. Let us see how human methods perform when the stakes are real. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was either an opportunity or a trap, and she couldn't tell which. General Krath considered the proposal. The risk is significant. If the humans fail, if their informal methods lead to disaster, it could cost lives. And if they succeed? Wellness asked quietly. What then? Then perhaps, Thorian said slowly, we learn something new after 800 years of the same old ways. The council voted. It was close, but the decision was made. Humanity would have its chance to prove that their game-playing approach to warfare was more than just disrespect wrapped in efficiency. 3 days later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the Coalition cruiser Eternal Vigilance, watching the tactical display as their fleet approached the pirate-controlled asteroid cluster. Beside her was General Krath, commanding the Drogar contingent, and Coordinator Wellness overseeing the strategic coordination. The pirates had chosen their position well. The asteroid field provided cover and made traditional approach vectors dangerous. The Coalition's standard protocol called for a methodical sweep, clearing each section systematically over several hours. Commander Chen, Krath rumbled, we begin the formal tactical sequence. All ships will assume position Beta 4 and await synchronized contact, a sensor officer called out. The pirates are launching fighters. They're attacking the medical supply convoy in Sector 9. Sarah's tactical display lit up with red markers. The convoy was lightly armed, carrying medicine and medical personnel to a plague-stricken colony world. If the pirates destroyed those ships, thousands would die. General, Sarah said urgently, we need to respond now. That convoy can't wait for the formal sequence. Krath's expression was conflicted. 800 years of tradition warred with the reality unfolding before him. The protocols exist for a reason, Commander. Hasty action leads to mistakes, and slow action leads to dead civilians, Sarah countered. She turned to her team, positioned at auxiliary stations around the bridge. Webb, give me an intercept course. Torres, calculate the pirates' likely escape vectors. Park, I need firing solutions for a split formation assault. Commander, Wellness's form flashed warning colors. You cannot simply ignore the chain of command. General Krath must approve. I approve, Krath said suddenly, surprising everyone, including himself. Coordinator, I spent 3 days reviewing recordings of human combat operations. I've seen what they can do when circumstances are dire. Perhaps it's time we witnessed it firsthand. Commander Chen, proceed with your operation. We will follow your lead. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude and terror. This was it. Everything they had claimed, everything they had argued for, now had to be proven in actual combat. All ships, this is Commander Chen, she transmitted on the fleet-wide channel. We're breaking formation. Coalition vessels will execute the standard suppression pattern. You know your protocols, and they'll work perfectly for containment. Human vessels and any coalition ships willing to try something new, follow my lead. We're going after those fighters before they reach the convoy. What happened next would be discussed in coalition military academies for generations. The human ships, joined by a handful of adventurous coalition vessels, broke from the main formation in a pattern that looked chaotic, but was actually carefully calculated. Instead of the traditional parallel approach, they came at the pirates from 7 different vectors simultaneously, using the asteroids not as obstacles but as cover and momentum assists. On the Eternal Vigilance's bridge, Sarah called out commands in rapid succession. Delta Group, swing wide and come in behind that big asteroid. Charlie Group, boost speed and draw their fire. Alpha Group, wait for my signal and then hit them from above. No formal protocols, no ceremonial language. Just clear, direct communication between officers who trusted each other. The pirates, accustomed to the predictable patterns of coalition tactics, were completely unprepared for the human approach. They attempted to fall back to their prepared defensive positions, only to find human ships already there, having taken unconventional routes through the asteroid field. Meanwhile, the main coalition fleet executed its standard suppression pattern flawlessly, cutting off the pirates' escape routes and providing heavy fire support. The combination was devastating. The coalition's disciplined, methodical approach combined with humanity's rapid, adaptive tactics created a pincer effect that gave the pirates no good options. Within 18 minutes, the pirate fleet was disabled or surrendering. The medical convoy was safe, and not a single coalition or human vessel had been destroyed. On the bridge, silence reigned for a long moment. Then General Krath began to laugh, a deep booming sound that shook the deck plating. Magnificent, he declared. Absolutely magnificent. Commander Chen, I owe you an apology. When you completed that simulation in 7 minutes, I thought you were being reckless. Now I understand. You weren't moving too fast. We were moving too slowly. Velnus's form shifted through colors that Sarah's xenopsychology training identified as profound contemplation. I begin to see it now. Your informality, your game-like approach to training, it allows you to think beyond the established patterns. You're not bound by tradition, so you see possibilities we miss. But your traditions gave us the structure we needed, Sarah pointed out. General, your suppression pattern was perfect. It provided exactly the stable foundation we needed for our more aggressive tactics. We couldn't have won without both approaches working together. Counselor Thex's voice came through the communication system. I have been observing from the command station. Commander Chen is correct. What we witnessed was not human superiority or coalition superiority. It was synthesis, the strength of both methods combined. Over the next week, something remarkable happened. The coalition didn't abandon its traditions, but it began to see them differently. Ceremonies and protocols remained for situations where careful deliberation was valuable, but emergency response procedures were revised. Training simulations were redesigned to reward creativity alongside discipline. And perhaps most importantly, junior officers were encouraged to question, to experiment, to play. On her last day at Nexus Prime, Sarah stood once more at the viewport, watching ships come and go from the massive station. General Krath approached, moving with surprising quietness for someone his size. Commander Chen, the Council has asked me to deliver a message. Humanity has not only passed the Strategic Command Assessment, you have changed it. The assessment protocols are being revised based on what we learned from your team. Sarah turned to him, surprised. General, I never wanted to overturn your traditions. You didn't overturn them, Krath replied. You reminded us why they exist. Traditions are meant to preserve wisdom, not prevent growth. We had forgotten that. The coalition was so focused on honoring the past that we stopped preparing for the future. He extended one of his 4 hands in the human gesture of greeting that he had practiced. Thank you, Commander, for showing us that taking warfare seriously doesn't mean we cannot find joy in mastering it, that respecting tradition doesn't mean being enslaved by it, and that sometimes the best way to prepare for the deadliest game is to remember that in practice war games are still games after all. Sarah shook his hand, smiling, and the best players are the ones who never stop learning new rules. As the human transport prepared to depart, Sarah gathered her team one final time. They stood together looking out at the station that had almost rejected them but now celebrated them. So, Marcus said with a grin, think they'll invite us back next year? Oh, I'm certain of it, Sarah replied. In fact, I hear they're adding a new section to the assessment. Something about adaptive tactics and unconventional strategy. Rachel laughed. Wonder where they got that idea. Doesn't matter, Sarah said, watching Nexus Prime recede into the distance. What matters is that we proved something important. Being different doesn't mean being wrong, and sometimes the greatest respect you can show a tradition is being willing to help it evolve. The transport jumped to FTL, carrying them home. Behind them, the coalition continued its debate, its evolution, its growth. And throughout the galaxy, military academies began teaching a new lesson alongside the old protocols, that creativity and discipline, play and seriousness, innovation and tradition, all could coexist. The galaxy had laughed at Earth's approach to war games, dismissing humanity's informal methods as childish and disrespectful. But they weren't laughing anymore. They were learning. And in the process, both humanity and the coalition were becoming something greater than either had been alone. Because sometimes, the most serious warriors are the ones who remember that even in preparation for battle, there's wisdom in treating challenges as games to be mastered, problems to be solved, and opportunities to prove that different approaches can strengthen rather than divide. The war games continued. But now they were played with both honor and joy, tradition and innovation, solemnity and creativity, and the galaxy was stronger for it.